That's set. Okay, and I'm also going to do one other. There we go. Okay, so hi everybody and welcome. First, I wanted to thank Dean Van Cleve and the Law Career Development Office for supporting this program. GGU is really committed to your professional success, and this boot camp was developed to support your unique needs as job seekers. Hang on, there we go. I am really excited to be back working with GGU graduates again. Some of you may recall that I used to work in what was then the Law Career Services Office, now the Law Career Development Office. And since leaving Golden Gate last year, I've launched a private career coaching practice here in Portland, Oregon, where I work with attorneys on their career management and professional development. Throughout this 6 weeks webinar series, you will be developing tools to be successful in your transition from law student to legal professional. To get the most out of this program, you are going to have to do some work. Each of you has a different starting point and a different goal. So I'll be providing you the framework, and each of you will need to apply it to your own situations. I'll make this as easy as I can. There's a workbook for each session, and you'll find a link in the message that you hopefully got today to remind you about today's session. So I do recommend that you have a printout of the workbook. Today's workbook is only 4 pages long, and a pen with you during the webinar. If you can't print it out or you didn't get that link, please grab a piece of paper and some pen so you can take some notes during our exercises. At the end of each session, I'll provide you with some homework to move you along in your process. So folks, I just got a message from Simorn at Law Career Development. Simorn, I don't think I can access the list of folks who RSVP'd. Corey may have it. I also got that by email from Nadine, who I know is out of the office. But if Corey is available, she may have that link. Okay, so let's move forward. So you're going to have the support not just of me during this program, but of the Law Career Development staff who will serve as your accountability partners in this process. Studies show that we're much more likely to take action when we know someone is there to pay attention and cheer us along. And in that spirit of community, I also encourage you to participate and share your thoughts and questions throughout the program. So if you have a question or a concern, most likely others are wondering the same thing. So for people to feel safe that they can share freely during this program, we all have to keep this a safe space. So it's important that if you learn something about one of your peers or colleagues throughout this program, that we keep it confidential and that whatever we learn about each other stays within this webinar. I do encourage you, though, if you notice somebody that you recognize in the program, please reach out to each other directly and support each other. If you have suggestions that might help somebody, please share those suggestions or resources. There are a few ways that you can participate in the webinars. If you have a question, you should be able to see a kind of a question and answer field. And so I encourage you to type your question in, and I will do my best either at that moment to answer it, or I will batch up the questions and answer them at the end, depending on what the content is. You can also respond to a topic at hand by using that chat feature, which some of you have already taken advantage of, and so I appreciate that. And then finally, I will be using a couple of polls throughout the presentation just to get a sense of where you are or how you're reacting to something. And so I encourage you to participate in those polls as well. Now, since we'll be working together for the next 6 weeks, I wanted to know something about you and where you are in this process. And so when you registered, we asked you, what is one of the strengths you would be bringing to your new job? And the answers that you shared are represented in this word cloud on the screen. And I'd love seeing those words all together because you guys are a really impressive bunch. You have the analytical skills, writing skills, legal experience, you're detail-oriented, you're diligent, you're willing to try new things. I mean, you have all of the qualities that employers are looking for in their future attorneys and their future employees. And I can see how your future employers are going to benefit from all of these qualities that you guys bring to the job. But I want you to think now about what's in it for you. Let's think about what your new job will do for you. What are the motivations behind your job goals? So I want you to turn to the front of that workbook if you were able to print it out. And if not, just grab that scrap of paper and a pen. And I want you to think about the qualities of a good job. And I don't mean a generic good job. What I'm talking about here is what is a good job for you. Each one of you is going to have different criteria about what's going to make something a good job. And so, that could involve the employer type or the practice area, or maybe you're focused on some features of the job, like it pays well, or the hours are predictable, or it's near public transit, or it offers courtroom experience. Each one of you has a different formulation of what a good job is. So I want you to take a moment and write down on your workbook or on your scrap of paper what your idea of a good job is. So just take a moment right now. And then what would finding that good job do for you? How would that change your life if you could find, or when you find that good job? Oops, my screen is jumping ahead of me. Hang on just a minute, folks. I'm just gonna fix our PowerPoint for... Okay, there we go. Oop. Bear with me, folks. I'm just having a couple of PowerPoint glitches. I want to get those resolved so we can move forward. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what would that do for you to find that good job? And write that down on your sheet there. Like, how would that change your life? How would that change your future? And then I want you to give some thought to how would that change your family or your community for you to find that good job for you. Jot down those ideas. And next, I want you to think about someone that we don't typically think about when we're doing our job search, but I want you to think about your future clients. How will they benefit by having you in that job where you can serve them? What do you bring that's going to help your clients? So hopefully you've written down a few ideas. And throughout your job search, I want you to pull out this piece of paper and reflect on what you've written. One of the most compelling qualities for a job candidate is being enthusiastic about the work they are seeking. You will be amazed how others will be drawn to you and want to share opportunities with you if you are clear in your convictions. And there are going to be moments when that job search is tough. Maybe you've encountered those moments already. And so circling back to what that original motivation is and how that will affect you and the people around you may give you that extra push that you need to keep moving forward. So as we mentioned, transitioning from law school to this new role as a legal professional does not happen overnight. And I'm impressed that you guys are focusing on this process now so that you can really be successful. We're planting seeds for your future, and a lot of the work that you do now will bear fruit in a little while. So I wanted to give you a bit of a preview of what we'll be covering in the webinars. So over the next 6 weeks, we'll be focusing initially today on taking stock of where you are and getting ready to make sure you are prepared to be successful in your job search. So we're going to examine your needs and how you can meet them. In the second session, we'll spend time identifying your ideal job and your target market. In the third session, we'll take a look at the relevant experience you have to offer now that you have a sense of where you're heading. And if there are any gaps in that experience, we'll discuss ways to fill them to make you more marketable. As you shift from student to professional, we need to make sure your professional brand is graduated too. So in the fourth session, we'll discuss ways to upgrade your job application materials and discuss how to use tools like LinkedIn and business cards and electronic media to support your brand. Success in the legal community is based on relationships. And in the fifth session, we'll spend time focusing on expanding your professional network. We'll discuss ways to connect with lawyers one-on-one, as well as ways to raise your profile within the legal community. And in our final session, we'll review what we've accomplished and create an action plan to keep you moving forward after the boot camp ends. Along the way, we'll also find time to discuss how to ace your job interviews, whether those interviews are on phone or in Skype or in person. So I just want to say, are there any other questions you have so far, or other topics that you were hoping we would be covering throughout our webinar? You could use the question and answer feature right now if there were things you were hoping we'd cover. And one of the nice things about this is it's quite flexible and I can tailor the program to your needs. So this six-session agenda might shift a little bit based on the questions you're sending my way. So I'll just take a moment. Are there any other topics that folks would like to have explored in the program? Okay, so let's keep moving on then. Okay, one moment. Okay. So I know this is a hard time, and I wanted to share some of the concerns that you shared with us when you registered for this program, since many of you seem to have the same issues and concerns. And the first one that I want to get out there is concerns about the bar. Several of you were worried about applying for jobs without knowing what your bar status is. And some of you confessed being concerned about what will happen if you don't pass the bar. Now, many of us get paralyzed by these what ifs. And for recent graduates, what if I don't pass the bar is pretty much the biggest one there is. Many of us envision an embarrassing conversation with a prospective employer, or that our job leads will evaporate. And while those outcomes are possible, if you find yourself in those situations, you have the strength and the resilience to handle them. That is one thing I will say about Golden Gate graduates. You guys are a strong, practical, resilient group of folks. So what I worry about is not about those scenarios. What I worry about is the opposite. And this is something I've seen time and time again. Graduates who don't take action on their job search because of those what ifs, and then they discovered that they did pass the bar. And at that point, they were several months behind their peers at getting their job search in order. And that gap can actually create a bigger problem. So as you'll see, most of what I'll be recommending throughout our programs are professional development strategies that will strengthen your credentials and boost your network. Engaging in these activities will make you a stronger applicant and will help you get on track in the event you need additional time to get licensed. They will add to your credibility as a candidate and can mitigate concerns if there is a delay in getting licensed. Avoiding the process now out of fear of the unknown will only make it harder to find a job later. Now, some of you also indicated that you weren't sure what type of legal work you were most interested in. And while many of the strategies we'll be discussing can be useful in that discovery process, I do recommend that you use this time to work directly with a counselor at Law Career Development to explore your strengths and investigate your options. Your job search will be much more effective if you can head out in a particular direction, even if you don't know the precise destination yet. A few of you also mentioned that you had relocated and were concerned that GGU may not have ties in your new location. This is something I can relate to because I just went through a big relocation myself. and I had to build a professional network from scratch. And so I just want to let you know that being new can actually be a benefit. I've seen this from my own firsthand experience. Being new in a community gives you the perfect opportunity to introduce yourself to folks and ask questions about community resources and organization by focusing on being a new arrival rather than focusing on your need for employment. And so that can feel sometimes like you're just asking from it's just a more welcoming position, and you'll tap into other people's sense of hospitality when they want to welcome you to their community. So I wouldn't let that, that concern get in your way. So I want to tell you a story, a tale of two job candidates. And this was a story that a senior lawyer had once told me about two candidates she had interviewed for an entry-level attorney position. Now, she was torn. Both of these candidates had strong credentials and were nearly identical on paper. She realized she would have to rely on the interview to decide which one to hire. She told me that both candidates did a good job addressing the substance of the interview questions, and she felt like either one of them could have performed the job. And here's how she described the candidates to me. Candidate A arrived early for the interview. His clothes were clean and appropriate. He appeared calm, confident, and enthusiastic. He was organized with the materials he was asked to bring to the interview and was responsive to the interviewer's questions. Candidate B arrived a few minutes late and appeared a bit frazzled. This candidate was dressed appropriately, but his clothes were wrinkled, and my friend had the impression that, he may have just grabbed whatever suit was lying on the top of his laundry pile on the floor. The interviewer observed that candidate B seemed preoccupied during the interview and forgot to bring one of the documents that she had requested. So I want to do a little poll right here. So if you were the job interviewer, the employer, which one of these candidates would you have hired? Candidate A or candidate B? Okay. So not surprisingly, candidate A was the one that 100% of you would have hired. And that's not a big shock, but I want to talk about that a little bit and talk about why. Why was it so obvious for us to hire candidate A? I mean, after all, these folks were identical on paper and both seemed capable of doing the job. So I asked the interviewer, what was it about these two that made the difference for her to hire candidate A? And she told me that she had an opportunity after the interview process to, there we go. She had an opportunity to actually talk with both candidates after the interview process ended. And she learned that both of them were dealing with similar stresses. They both were worried about the bar exam. They were both worried about paying back their loans. They were both worried about their futures. But what impressed her with candidate A is that he had found a way to manage that stress and anxiety, while candidate B allowed that stress and anxiety to manage him. And she was really surprised at how clearly this difference manifested itself in their interview performance. So we know this is a challenging time. It takes time, and progress for your job search is not always predictable. It doesn't always move in a linear fashion. It doesn't always move in a predictable pace. You're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, and sometimes you may feel like this process is a little bit out of your control. And I hate to say it, but once you land the job, the stress of looking for a job can be replaced with the stress of performing that job. There are some things that you can control, and the way that you respond to these stressors is within your control. And it's essential that you take care of yourself during this transition. Doing so has a significant impact on how you are showing up in your job search and how employers will respond to you. So just like we saw with that prior illustration with candidates A and B. So you may be wondering, why are we spending a lot of time focusing on stress right now rather than your resume and your networking plan? I promise we will get to those topics in future sessions. But if we don't get a handle right now on the pressures that are weighing on you, you're going to end up sabotaging all of your hard work and diligence in the job search. Ironically, most of us feel like focusing on these underlying needs is a luxury that we can't afford, when in fact, we can't afford not to. So I want to take a few minutes in this first webinar to make sure that you are prepared to bring your best self to your job transition. So I wanted you to take a look at this circle. If you have the workbook, it's on page 2, and you'll see that it's divided into 8 slices. For each slice, I want you to take a moment and ask yourself how well your needs are being met right now in each of those areas on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being really well met and 0 being not met at all. And then for each of those slices, draw a line on the appropriate number. So for example, if you've developed a routine to incorporate exercise into your schedule in a way that energizes you, you can indicate 10 in the exercise segment. But if you find that you are not getting nearly enough sleep, maybe you draw a line somewhere around 3 or 4 for that one. So let's pause for a moment, and I want you to rank each of these and draw that line across the circle for each wedge, rating it from 0 to 10. If you don't have the circle in front of you, just on a piece of scrap paper, you can write down these headings and just give it a score of 0 to 10. So I'm curious, how does your circle look? Did you draw a smooth circle all the way around, all at number 10? Or does your line weave in and out, which is what typically happens for most of us? In order to sustain yourself during this transition, you need to bring your best self to the process, and that means you have to take care of your basic needs. So what would it do for you if you could increase your score in most of those areas? And how would that affect your confidence and your effectiveness as you interact with employers? Are there ways that your stress is leaking out and you don't even realize it? Any slice that you scored below a 5 really needs to be addressed now. Postponing it is only going to exacerbate the problem and create greater stress for you down the road. So let's do some brainstorming. For each slice where you've scored 5 or lower, I want you to write down on your piece of paper 3 different things that you could do to raise your score in that area. For example, if you scored low in stress management, you might include ideas like going for a run every day or doing 10 minutes of meditation with an app like Insight Timer or Headspace. So I just want you to take a few minutes and jot down a few ideas in any of those areas where you scored low of a few things that might help bring up your score. So let's pause here for a moment. I'll say many of the categories around that circle are very unique to your particular situation. And if you're struggling to come up with ideas, this could be something that you even chat with a law career development counselor about in terms of how do you meet your needs to support you in your job search. But I suspect many of you, one thing that's in common is this idea of the anxiety and the stress and really being able to sustain your energy and your excitement over the long haul. There are going to be ups and there are going to be downs with this job search, and there may be some setbacks. And so I want to make sure you are prepared to handle them and bounce back. We don't want it creeping into the way you present yourself to employers. And so I'm happy to share a few ideas, certainly around the stress management. And perhaps if you guys have some ideas of things that are working for you, you can use the chat feature to share them with the others on the webinar. But I briefly mentioned meditating, and that's something that I've started doing, just moving up to Portland. Maybe that's something about being in Portland, but just having 10 minutes a day where you can just do some deep breathing or clear your mind and just have a few moments to yourself can really change the way you approach the rest of your day. And so I encourage you to give it a shot if it's not something you've done before. There are some free apps that you can use, like Insight Timer. There's another app called Headspace, which is really popular. And you can play around with those to see if that would help you. For many of us, exercise is really key to staying healthy and having that energy and having a way to burn off stress. Some of the things on this chart, having a social network, having friends and family you can rely on who can support you when you're feeling down. Working with the counselors at LCN or Law Career Development or other counselors if you're finding that you need a little bit more emotional support. Now is a good time to seek out those resources. You don't have to brave this situation alone. There are people who want to help you. And being in a job search can be very isolating, and especially since in that time since leaving the school environment where you saw folks every day and now you're feeling a little more on your own, that sense of isolation can creep in. So pay attention to that. There's some other community resources too. So for those of you in California, if you've sat for the bar exam, I believe you may be eligible to take advantage of the Lawyer Assistance Program at the State Bar. And they offer a variety of career development resources and counseling resources. And I've noticed they actually have a new early career support program and some career development teams and resources. So take a look on the State Bar's website to learn more about those programs, because those may be great opportunities for you to get some additional support and guidance and resources. The Bar Association of San Francisco also has programs to help new graduates make the transition, and so I would encourage you to take a look at those opportunities as well. There are a lot of folks who want to help you with this process, who want to support you, and who want to boost you up, so take advantage of those opportunities. Don't be afraid to ask for help. So now that you've come up with some of the areas that you want to work on, I want you on the bottom of page 2 of your worksheet to make a list of the 5 ideas that you're ready to commit to trying in this next week. So 5 different ways that you can just take care of your basic needs. So what are those actions, and write them down. And then I want you to think, well, what could get in the way of you actually taking that action, right? There's a reason why we're not doing these things already. So what's getting in the way? And then what will you do to prevent that thing from getting in the way from you acting? Are there resources that you have to follow through on these commitments? Or maybe people who can support you in making these changes? Write those down and really make that commitment this week to try these 5 new things. You might even try posting this list somewhere visible. So some people will post it on their bathroom mirror, and so they see it when they brush their teeth in the morning. I actually keep a list over my desk of different habits I'm trying to cultivate, things to help me take care of these needs. And so I'll look at it every time I sit at my desk, and it's staring from that bulletin board back to me as a nice, gentle reminder of the commitments I made to myself. So I do want to take a moment, because I know for many of you, financial stability may be one of the issues that you've scored low on, and that is a really pressing concern for many graduates. And so I just want to share some of what I've observed during my 20 years when I worked at Golden Gate, of the different ways that graduates approach this issue to try to have some, money to take care of their needs while they were pursuing their job search. One of the most effective strategies for the graduates I worked with was utilizing Golden Gate's Bridge Fellowship program, since that's a way to build legal experience and get paid for it at the same time. Now, this is a program that's only available to members of the class of 2016, but it's a fantastic program if you are in that group. Essentially, the way it would work is you would find a qualifying host organization who would want to have you working in their office for the next several months. They know it's not a permanent job, and so if you have to go on job interviews or even leave the position before your several months is up, they understand that. And so it's not a big deal. They're not going to think you're flaky if you have to leave the job early because you found permanent work. And it's only a part-time commitment. And so that means you still have time available during your day to find other paid employment or focus on your job search or your networking efforts or pro bono work or the other things that you're doing in this transition time. So I really encourage you to learn more about the program, which you can do. I believe there's information on LCD online, or you can contact Law Career Development directly to learn more about the program. Others I worked with at GGU found work on an hourly basis, typically with a law firm or a corporation in their legal department. Ideally, these positions involved legal work, but some graduates who had previous experience as paralegals or legal secretaries were able to find some short-term positions that use those administrative skills. Other graduates relied on non-legal jobs in the retail or food service industries. And while that's not the kind of work most of you are envisioning, they found that it was actually really helpful to have work that spanned evening and weekend hours because it kept their weekdays free so that they could focus on their job search or do pro bono work or do other activities that would support their job search during business hours. Some graduates worked with temp agencies to fill short-term needs or litigation support roles, and I believe LCD has a list of agencies that you can contact to learn more about those opportunities. And if any of you have other ways that you've earned money and are willing to share, I encourage you to do so. I will give you one caveat about applying to law firms for long-term paralegal or other administrative positions, because this was a theme that would come up over and over again. Most law school graduates found that employers were not interested in people with JDs for those roles. And that makes sense. Those employers are looking to hire long-term professionals who will stay with those firms for a long period of time in those paralegal or administrative roles. And when they see a JD applying, they become very skeptical because they assume as soon as you get positive bar results, you're going to be leaving that job and pursuing an attorney position. And so whatever training they've invested in you will be walking out the door. They also fear that JDs might be trying to use those positions as a way to kind of sneak in through the back door, which again is something that they're not really interested in because they'll have to then hire a new paralegal and train that person again. So if you've already applied for those kinds of positions and haven't gotten the response you desired, don't take it personally. I usually counsel graduates against applying for these positions since the volume of rejections you get is likely to be demoralizing and honestly has nothing to do with your merits as an applicant. It's really just the employer has a bias because they want to hire someone who is committed to those particular roles for long term. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about ways to take care of your basic needs to create that stable foundation for your career transition. What about these other obstacles that keep appearing in your path? And like the tires on this slide, they're not preventing you from moving forward, but they do slow you down and they drain your energy. Most of us have a bunch of items on our, I keep meaning to take care of list, and there may be small little things that we ignore or avoid, like replacing the ink in your printer, or calling your lender to work out a payment plan, or taking your interview suit to the cleaners, or setting up a system on your computer to organize your job applications. For me, it was unpacking those last few boxes that we had after we moved up to Oregon. I'd move the boxes from here to there, restacking them, or I'd dig around inside for the things I was looking for, but just couldn't seem to unpack them and put everything away. Now, while these things may seem small, we tolerate them and allow them to pile up, and they drain our energy. And each time we think of them, don't take any action, costs us a little bit of that mental energy. So I'd like to compare it to paying interest on a loan. The time it would take you to ultimately just take care of removing that obstacle is like the principal of your loan. You're going to end up paying it no matter what. But that extra time and energy you spend avoiding it or moving it or dealing with it or not dealing with it is like an interest payment. And the more you avoid it, the more it adds up. So if you could eliminate items from your I keep meaning to list, what would that do for you? Would that free up some time you could devote to taking care of those other needs we talked about? Or would they give you some energy to reinvest in your job search? Could it even save you some money to help sustain you during your job search? And so to help you reverse that energy drain and gain some momentum, I want you to write down on page 3 of your worksheet some of those obstacles that are just getting in your way that you are currently tolerating. And then I want you to pick 2 of them that you can commit to tackling in the next 48 hours. You will be amazed by just jumping on them, getting them done. You will get a little boost of energy and momentum, and you may decide to tackle even more on that list. So again, you might want to have that visual reminder, have this tacked up in front of you too, just to kind of work through that list. And then when you've eliminated that obstacle, you can write the date down there or cross it off the list. And then it's something you can look back on to see, okay, I'm getting stuff done. I am moving things out of my way so I can be productive with my job search. Okay, so now I want to, now that we've put some of these obstacles behind us, let's focus our remaining time together on moving forward with the job search. So I have a second poll. Let me get that set up. Okay, so when you think about the time you spend on your job search, of that job search time, how much are you allocating to finding and responding to job announcements? So if you could take a vote right now, how much of your job search time is spent on finding and responding to job announcements? Okay, just waiting for a couple, the rest of you to take the poll. Okay, great. So let's see. So half of you are spending about 50% of your time dealing with job announcements. And some of you, let's see, one of you is spending 20% of your time, and someone else said no percent of your time. So that's great. And probably you guys have been talking to the folks at Law Career Development and already have a sense of the hidden job market, which is what we'll talk about right now. I mean, what we have found is that, you know, most people spend most of their effort looking at job announcements, but experts say that only 20% of available jobs are ever posted, right? So you have 100% of people looking at 20% of the jobs. So those odds are not great. You have a lot of competition for those opportunities. And this is compounded by the fact that you're all seeking similar jobs and you have similar credentials as you're, you know, applying for entry-level attorney positions. But if you can engage in activities that are going to help you tap into those 80% of jobs that no one else is paying attention to, that can really enhance your odds. And so in our remaining weeks together, we're going to focus on strategies to tap into the hidden job market. These strategies have the dual benefit of making you look more attractive to employers while also having you learn about jobs that nobody else is hearing about. Now, this isn't to say you should ignore job listings altogether. I can't tell you how many times we had employers post announcements when I was at GGU asking us, like, why aren't people applying for our job? So when employers post jobs at GGU, they actually want to hear from you, and those can be really good opportunities. So if you see a listing, apply for it. But you can't have that be your entire job search. And frankly, you'll find it really demoralizing if that's all you're doing. It's also limiting your opportunities to just responding to the ones that are presented to you instead of going out and finding ones that will be a better fit. And so most folks report that when they focus on the professional development opportunities that we'll be discussing in our remaining sessions, they feel energized and actually more optimistic about their prospects. So one of the most challenging things about this long-term job transition is managing your time. And when we feel overwhelmed, it's easy to procrastinate and just kind of push things off. Frankly, it's easy to avoid focusing on this. Most of us don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to go find a job today. But the best way to prevent this problem and is to make your job search predictable and habitual. And so if you haven't done so already, I really recommend that you map out a schedule each week, ideally dedicating a specific time each day to your search. And so, over the weekend or whenever that time is right for you, to map out what's my job search going to look like this week, and actually create appointments on your calendar. So if you have a paper calendar, block off that time, or if you have use Google Calendar or some other electronic calendar, you can create those appointments there. To increase your efficiency, I would use these job search appointments to tackle those larger, more intimidating, time-consuming tasks first. So you might, these are the things we tend to avoid, but they're going to have the biggest payback for you if you can just sit down and do them. So schedule those appointments, and you might even, in your Google Calendar or whatever calendar system you're using, like I like to list those specific tasks I plan to handle on that particular job search appointment within the note section of the calendar appointment. So if I know on Tuesday afternoon I've carved out 2 hours, that's, I might write in the appointment, these are the 3 people I'm contacting for informational interviews, or I'm going to register on this job search website, or whatever it is. I'm actually going to give myself assignments, so when that time comes, I can be very purposeful with that appointment. You might also have a list of smaller tasks that you just kind of keep handy, so when you have 10 free minutes in between appointments, or if the webinar ends early, or if you're in between things, that you can just cross those little job search tasks off your list. But you want to try not to use your sort of focused job search time on those small little throwaway tasks. Find ways to plug them in elsewhere in your day. Now, I have one other key to help you with your success, and that is to identify some small rewards that you can give yourself at the end of the week. So if you honor those daily job search appointments and you take care of those tasks that you set out, you need to recognize that. Like, this is hard work. Well, it doesn't have to be that hard, but it's long. And so we may not be crossing that finish line for a while, but it doesn't mean you're not making progress. And so it's really helpful to have some carrots for motivation, and a way to pat yourself on the back when you followed through and took care of the things that you promised yourself you would. And so I want you to think about, how will you treat yourself? What are some little things you could do for yourself that make you feel good, that are a nice reward or a nice incentive to keep moving forward with this process? And I would encourage you to actually write down a couple of those ideas on your worksheet, so on page 4 of your workbook. So I want to pause here and just see, are there any questions so far on what we've discussed, or any ideas that people want to share? And if there are, you could either use the question and answer feature or the chat feature if folks have questions or tips or things that have worked for them in terms of relieving stress or honoring their time commitments with the job search, creating rewards. Okay, if there are no questions, and these two, if you want to ask questions of topics you'd like presented at future sessions, this would be a good way to do it too, using that question and answer feature. If not, let's take a look again at the homework that we set out for today's session. So as a review, I want you, and these are all listed on page 4, so to take those 5 actions that are going to help you take care of your needs. No one else is going to do this for you. You need to take care of yourself so that you can be bringing your best self to that job search process. So when you show up, that employer sees calm, clear, energetic you, and not stressed out, anxious, preoccupied you. I want you to also clear at least 2 obstacles that are slowing you down in the next 48 hours, and then keep adding to that list and slowly tackling those other obstacles that are slowing you down. We also want to Allocate time on your calendar for job search activities. And the amount of time is going to be different for each of you because you each have different responsibilities in different situations. So people often ask, how much time? It's how much you can dedicate to it. You want to use that time wisely. I mean, it's a lot like studying in law school or studying for the bar. It's not only the amount of time, it's what you're doing with it. But I find if you can be purposeful and mindful to allocate that time and how you want to spend it, you will be much more productive with that time. And then I want you to create a little reward system for yourself to honor your achievements and those little victories along the way. So for next week, I also have a little bit of homework for next week, and that is I want you to come to our webinar prepared to talk about your target job. And so some of you may have a really clear picture of what this looks like, and for others, it's still forming, and that's fine. So give some thought to who your ideal clients might be, however you define that, okay? You might also give some thought if you have an ideal practice area, or if there's several practice areas that are interesting to you. I also want you to think about, how do you want to help your clients? Are you helping them solve problems? Are you helping address wrongs in their life? Are you helping them do some planning for their futures? How is it that you want to help your clients? And I also want you to give some thought to where you want to work. And so this could be very literal in terms of geography, if there's a particular city in which you want to work. And for others, it may be more about the setting. Is it a formal environment, informal, big, small, law firm, government, public interest? Again, each of you is going to have a different way of conceptualizing what that environment will look like. But if you give some thought to these 4 areas, next we'll pick up the piece next week to see how do we use this information to identify your target job and target employers. So any questions before we wrap up today's presentation? Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions or anything in the chat feature. As I've said earlier, I'm really open to incorporate other topics into the remaining 5 weeks. I want this to be useful and helpful to you. So you can email those topics to Law Career Development, and they'll pass them on to me, and I will weave them into the remaining 5 sessions that we have. So if they're not there already, I'll find a way to incorporate them. And if you have questions along the way, I also encourage you to work with the counselors at Law Career Development. They are there to help and support you throughout this process. So if there are no other questions at this time, I think we can wrap things up. I was able to get you out before 1 o'clock, even though we started a few minutes late. And I'll look forward to seeing all of you next Monday at noon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.